Hello everyone and welcome to another video. And now in the past couple of videos we have taken a look at Intel's 4th gen i7 lineup, pairing the 4770S and the 4790K with discrete graphics cards. Today however we're going to take a look at how the HD 4600 iGPU handles itself in a handful of my favourite games, just to give the 4790K here a little bit of a send-off. Now we still have this overclocked to 4.7 GHz. The iGPU has remained untouched. The 4790K actually has the highest clocked HD 4600 iGPU, coming in at 1250 MHz. These graphics have been around since 2013, but as part of the 4790K, they appeared of course in 2014. So let's take a look at the sort of game you can expect to play when using these. This is going to be a pretty short video I think, but it's nice to go back and see how older and what was considered lower end integrated graphics handle themselves. So we will start with the notorious GTA 4. Now it depends on your hardware, but you may have an easy or difficult time running this. It really is hard to gauge. You might have a really powerful PC and the game doesn't run very well, or you might have a low end rig and it's going to run flawlessly. What with DXVK these days as well, and Fusion Fix of course, we do see some improvements from those too. I haven't made any changes here. I've downloaded it from Steam. We're running it in standard DX9 mode. We're seeing over 40 frames per second, closer to 50 in fact. This is with 720p and the lowest settings. Now I do miss how you could make older games look like they were actually set to low settings. These days a lot of modern titles, it doesn't really matter what you go with in terms of graphical options because they're going to look very similar. That isn't the case with every newer game of course, but it's something I've noticed over the years. Low settings these days aren't quite as low settings back in the day. Like Crysis is another good example. It would look like a totally different game at the lowest settings compared to Ultra, and I think the same can be said for GTA 4 here. The city looks rather empty. Textures, well, they're there, but they're not very, well, textury. But it is running well, and that's all we can ask. The percentile lows are good too. Now with the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, this is the OG version of course, which launched back in 2011. The drivers, by the way, for the HD 4600 here date back to 2020. Windows Update actually installed these, so all I did was fire up the 4790K system with Windows 11 here, and Windows Update just installed the necessary graphical drivers. Doesn't always work that way. Sometimes we get older drivers installed, but here, yeah, it was absolutely fine. I actually started off at 720p and we were seeing over 60 FPS by quite some margin, about 85 FPS in some instances, so I thought we could certainly afford to push things to 1080p and still have a plus 30 FPS experience. This actually did better than I thought here. We were seeing 45 with the low preset. Pushing things to medium at 1080p did see quite the difference in terms of performance. We were looking at less than 30 FPS, so I'd advise sticking to 720p with higher graphical options or 1080p with lower settings like I've done here. And to be honest, it's a pretty flawless experience. Now CSGO back in the day would have ran pretty well on the HD 4600 iGPU, but CS2 is more demanding, and to get this one running with at least 30 FPS we need 720p, the lowest settings, and FSR. Now we have this set to balanced mode. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it does mean the difference between sub 30 and plus 30 FPS. I think some of you would argue that 30 FPS isn't playable in an online fast-paced shooter like this, but considering the hardware, I'm just happy that we did see that plus 30 FPS average, though this isn't without a few problems. Actually saying that, the average and percentile lows were very good. There were no major dips and drops with this one, so yeah, playable. In some areas the frame rate will hit at least 40-50 frames per second, but you're certainly best off with the low settings at this lower resolution. Don't drop it any lower than this though, because then the CPU sort of becomes the bottleneck. So like trying to go for 800 by 600 won't make a performance difference. You'll actually get slightly worse frame rates, at least I found that we did. Now one of my all-time favourites is the original Tomb Raider here, or 2013's Tomb Raider. I shouldn't say the original Tomb Raider of course, but the original, I guess, reboot of the series here. I think it dates back to 2013. We're looking at least 30 FPS at 1080p. 37 was the average with a 1% low of 31 and a 0.1% low of 25. Now you may want to consider 720p. That is of course going to get us a far higher average frame rate, but I wanted to just target 30 FPS, and if that was more than achievable at 1080p, then that's the resolution I decided to go with. This is how I would have experienced it originally, I think back on the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 all those years ago, so I think it's running better here than it would have on those consoles. But interesting to note that it is definitely more than playable on the 4600, or at least more playable than I was anticipating, that's for sure. Now, if you are looking to play Fortnite on the i7 4790K and HD 4600 graphics, then you can expect almost 60 FPS, or perhaps more than this in some areas, but overall it's going to average out at about 51. Don't forget as well that the 4th gen iGPUs are all clocked differently here. The 4790K has the highest clocked HD 4600 graphics, 1250 MHz. These will boost to by default. This was enough for 51 FPS in Fortnite at 720p, albeit with 70% resolution scale. So it's going to look a little rough around the edges in some areas, but again, I'm just grateful that we are seeing at least 30 FPS, and this took me by surprise. This is running in performance mode as well, or the legacy performance mode, because I think they've introduced a DX12 performance mode these days, but we can't actually utilize DX12 with this CPU and iGPU combo. Next up, we have the legendary GTA 5 here. This is, of course, the legacy version of the game. We are at 720p resolution once again here with the lowest settings. We can still hit at least 30 frames per second. Fortunately, the average came back at 35, and the percentile lows were pretty respectable, 29 and 28. Now, for those of you wondering, I've paired the i7 with 16GB of DDR3 RAM. This is clocked at 1866 MHz, so it's pretty snappy for DDR3. You'd probably see slightly less performance from slower memory. DDR3 thankfully is still quite affordable, at least here it doesn't seem to have been affected that much by price rises, at least not at the time of this video, and especially on the used market. So just go for as much as you can and as fast as you can in terms of DDR3. We have Minecraft Java Edition next. This is running at 1080p resolution with the fast graphics preset. This actually defaulted to fancy, but I thought no, let's see how well it runs at fast, and I wasn't expecting much here, but plus 60 FPS was easily achievable. In fact, we saw over 100 frames per second. This is just in creative mode here, so I'm just sort of chopping the grass about, flying through the air, trying to get the frame rate to drop a little bit, but overall, no real issues. Occasionally there was a quick dip and drop, and this is responsible for those percentile figures, which are a little lackluster, but overall cannot complain at all from Minecraft Java here. 1080p with a fast preset for a really decent gameplay experience, in my opinion. I think I was perhaps being a little ambitious with Fallout 4, but I thought it was worth a go anyway. We have the game running at 720p with a low preset and FXAA for 29 frames per second. Now you may see the occasional increase to at least 30 frames per second, and this can make things feel quite jarring, especially when it drops again, so you might want to consider a frame rate cap, and I did this with Reaver Tuner. It didn't make much of a difference. The average still came back at less than 30, 29 in fact, and there were still some hefty performance changes when moving between different areas of the game, but it still did better than I anticipated. Now, while we can't run the sequel, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, we can run the original game at 720 by 576. So I guess this is 576p. It's going to look a little stretched on a 1080p display. I'm running with the lowest settings here for 28 frames per second. Now, interestingly, in and around Ratai here, one of the sort of first cities that you'll probably come across in this game, we're getting at least 30 FPS. And when we venture out of the city walls, this is when performance tanks. I always assumed it was the other way around, and that's something I've experienced on other hardware. We venture outside of the city walls, and then we drop like 10 FPS, which is odd. But I think it might be all the trees and the woodland in the background there affecting this performance. It really is going to be a mixed bag depending on where you are in the game, but a lot of the time it's playable and sometimes it's not. You can drop the resolution even lower if you want. It goes down to like 640 by 480, but at that point you're just able to count the pixels on screen, so this is probably as low as I'd be willing to go if I was really desperate to play this. And it is a good game, so I'd definitely consider it. Let's finalise then with Left 4 Dead 2. Still finds itself in the top 100 most played games on Steam, and it's no surprise why. Definitely fun just to sit down and lose a few hours to this one here, and thankfully it runs pretty much flawlessly on the HD 4600. We're looking at 1080p with the lowest settings here, 91 FPS with the average, and the percentile lows were also above 60 FPS, so just look at that frame time graph, smooth as anything. 67 and 63 were those percentile numbers. So the HD 4600 still has its uses in 2026, that's for sure. Just don't go expecting to play any modern AAA titles on them, but if you have one of these CPUs, you want to play a few older or lightweight games, yeah, I mean, you're not going to have a problem in some of those titles out there, and in a lot of ways this did a lot better than I was anticipating. But let me know what you think down below. Thanks as always for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.